All right, let's dive into one of the most challenging ideas from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. We're talking about law number 2, and it's a big one. It basically says that when power's on the line, your friends could be your biggest liability, and believe it or not, your enemies might just be your greatest asset.
So, let's just start with the question that gets right to the heart of it. Who's the real danger to you? Is it the person you're openly competing with, the one you're always watching? Or is it the person you trust completely, the one you let your guard down around? Well, according to this law, the answer's probably not the one you think.
So the first half of this law is basically a giant warning sign. It says, be careful with friends. See, in the world of power, bringing your buddies into your work life isn't just a little risky, it can be a huge, fatal mistake. All the lines get blurry, expectations get messy, and right below that friendly surface, something really dangerous can start to grow.
Let's get into the psychology of this for a second. With a stranger or a rival, your guard is up, right? You're watching them, trying to figure out their angle. But with a friend, you relax, you let them in. And that comfort, that familiarity, can make you totally blind to the quiet currents of envy or resentment that can build up when one friend starts climbing way higher than the other. You think you know them, but you really don't see the whole picture. And if you want a perfect, if terrifying example of this, look at the story of Emperor Hideyoshi in Japan. His closest confidant was Sen no Rikyu, a master of the tea ceremony. This guy wasn't just an advisor, he was a dear friend. He even had his own apartment in the palace. And yet one day in 1591, Hideyoshi just has him arrested and sentenced to death. A powerful friendship at the very top, and it ends in betrayal and execution. So what on earth happened?
Well, the answer wasn't some big, obvious act of treason. No, the real poison was the emperor's own insecurity. Riku was just brilliant. He was cultured, everyone admired him. And his very talent, his presence, started to make the emperor feel small, less powerful. A friend's success stopped being a source of pride and instead became this constant nagging reminder of the master's own insecurities.
And that insecurity? It opens the door to something even more toxic. Envy. Envy is the silent killer of friendships when power is involved. A friend is way more likely to feel it because they're right there, watching you rise up close. And they start to think, hey, I deserve that too. Why them and not me?
And this is the real trap. Your personal feelings, your shared history, all of that stuff just clouds your judgment. You're way less likely to spot the little signs of envy coming from a friend than you would from a stranger. You want to believe the best of them, so you ignore the red flags, right up until it's too late.
This brings us to a really brutal concept called the fall of the favorite. This quote lays out the cold, hard math of power. See, when things go wrong, a leader needs someone to blame, a scapegoat. And who's more convenient than a close associate, a friend? Sacrificing your favorite protects your own reputation. So in the end, that very closeness that felt like such a strength, it becomes their greatest weakness.
So let's just quickly recap the first part of this law. Friends can be dangerous because, 1, they're more likely to get envious. 2, they feel like they can take liberties and ask for special favors. 3, they totally blur the lines between professional and personal. And maybe most importantly, their loyalty is something you just assume is there. It hasn't actually been tested in the fire.
Okay, so if friends are such a liability, what's the move? Well, this is where the law gets really interesting. It tells us to learn how to use our enemies. Now, I know it sounds totally backwards, but there is a surprisingly powerful logic to it. You know, Machiavelli figured this out centuries ago. He noticed that new rulers often got more loyalty and better work out of the people they were suspicious of at first. And why is that? Because a former enemy who comes over to your side isn't just coasting on good vibes. They're starting from zero, and they have to earn everything. And that's the absolute key difference. A former enemy, once you bring them into your circle, knows they're under a microscope. They have zero room for error. So to keep their new position, they will often work harder, be more loyal, and be more careful than a friend who just takes their spot for granted. They're grateful, and they are desperate to prove you made the right choice. The story of the Chinese Emperor Sung is just a perfect example of this in action. He defeats this rival king, Lu, and all his ministers are screaming, "Lock him up! He's still a threat!" A little later, Lu offers the emperor a glass of wine. The whole court freaks out, they're sure it's poison. But Emperor Sung does something amazing. He just takes the glass and drinks it. And with that one calculated act of trust, he turned a dangerous rival into, as the history books say, his most trusted and loyal friend. So what this law is really getting at is not that you should be a bad friend or hate everyone, not at all. It's about learning to use an unsentimental kind of math when power is involved.
It's about stripping away those emotional labels like friend and enemy and judging people by a totally different standard.
And when you put them side by side, the contrast is pretty stark. With friends, you often get envy, favors, and a loyalty you just hope is there. With former enemies, you get people who are driven to prove themselves in a relationship that's totally professional, with a loyalty that is actively earned, not just assumed.
So the final takeaway here is this: detach. You have to separate your personal feelings from the game of power. Your decisions have to be based on what people have actually done, their skills, their proven loyalty, not on how much you like hanging out with them. At the end of the day, competence and reliability have to win out over camaraderie.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Look at your own world, your career, your life. The people you really rely on. Is their loyalty just something you assume is there because you have history, or is it something that has actually been tested and proven through real challenges? It's a tough question, but according to this law, the answer could make all the difference in the world.